Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this episode of Apparel with Purpose. Really exciting to be featuring another one of our partners at Cherry Willow. We will be having the founder of Aegrum Discovery and Development and Cracked Consciousness on the show, Christian Bedrusky. Really excited to share some of his story with you and the really important work that he's doing in the addiction, mental health, and recovery space. So want to just give a little update on some Cherry Willow items before I introduce today's guest. So as you all remember, in July, I biked from Sacramento to San Diego to raise money, and we stopped at 7 different nonprofits along the way. The documentary should be coming out here by the end of the month. So really excited to bring that all to you. We'll also have more content with some long form interviews that we did. And just a lot of different things surrounding the ride coming up. We do have a few exciting updates that we are working on launching as we get into the new year around both our technology initiative and also another really exciting event. So please stay tuned to Cherry Willow Apparel on LinkedIn, YouTube, follow on Facebook, Instagram. Really excited to continue to bring on updates and bring new partners into the organization. And so with that said, I would love to bring on today's guest and introduce Christian. He has been partnered with us at Cherry Willow, and we have a collection that we'll be featuring. But really the goal today is just to kind of introduce you to Christian, his story and why he does the work that he does, and then how it all ties back into our work at Cherry Willow, empowering nonprofit partners, businesses, people in recovery, and trying to help people think differently about homelessness. So Christian, really excited to have you on, and thank you for joining us today.
Hey, how's it going, brother? I'm super stoked to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So I'd love if you could just kind of give yourself a little bit of an introduction to the audience. Most people, I'll reintroduce myself in case you're coming in from Christian's audience. So I'm Matt Fogarty, the founder of Cherry Willow Apparel. We're a cause-based apparel brand that really focuses on wearable advocacy and working with our partners to use apparel as a marketing and branding tool to help them further their message in the community and also reach a younger demographic. Think millennials such as myself, Gen Z, people reaching them where they're at on social media and giving them an easy way to support organizations and people like Christian that are doing really incredible work. So Christian, I'd love if you could kind of just give the audience an introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, well, I mean, a little bit about me. Like, first and foremost, I'm a person in recovery. I struggled with everything, alcohol, heroin, fentanyl, um, methamphetamine, benzodiazepines for about 15 years of my life. Um, Dude, I went to so many detoxes and so many treatment centers and so many sober livings and I was on and off the streets and in and out of jail and I just couldn't get this thing right until about 2 years ago. And now I'm working on a social work master's degree at ASU here in Arizona. Um, and my main focus right now is the clinical internship that I'm doing at an organization called Community Bridges. We specialize in mostly AUD and SUD, but crisis and coordination of care. Um, I honestly have no idea how I got here, but I'm super grateful nonetheless.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the level of vulnerability it takes to share your story and put it out there with the world. That's one of the groups that I've become connected with through my service work at the shelter. That I think is some of the coolest people I've ever met are an AA group that comes to the shelter and they serve. They bring great food and they have just such great energy and camaraderie. And so I think that the people that have gone through the struggle and they get to the other side, it's so inspiring to see, you go out and not only continue to work on yourself, but show other people that you're showing up for them, even if they can't show up for themselves. And that's really powerful. And I really appreciate you coming on and being able to share a little bit of that story with us.
Yeah. Excuse me. Absolutely. I got sober in AA, and we have an amazing recovery community here in the Valley. Um, I still remember the person that, he showed me, he was the first person to show me like it was possible. His story, was so similar to mine, and I was like, well, if he can overcome the same things that I've been through, maybe I can too. And I fell in love with the Alcoholics Anonymous literature. I got super involved. And we have AA groups, we have heroin anonymous groups, we have crystal meth anonymous, smart recovery, recovery dharma. We have so many meeting halls, so many sober living, so many addiction treatment companies and mental health providers out here. If you want to get off of the streets and get off of drugs, like Arizona's the place to do it.
Yeah, and that kind of brings us into our first topic, which was, the journey into recovery and consciousness. So you touched a little bit on your journey, and I'm happy to share. If you have any questions about my journey to starting, not the same path as you were battling addictions and substances, but few of my loved ones battled mental health challenges, and after helping them navigate what in a lot of ways is a broken system, I had to learn a lot about trauma, learn a lot about people's responses to trauma, and how, if you have that avoidant tendency, or if you're not able to process what you're going through, that can manifest itself in other ways where everyone has a vice. And, some people turn to alcohol, some people turn to drugs, other people may turn to like overeating, or, maybe buying things with consumerism and materialism. And there's so many different ways that people can distract themselves from doing that internal work. And so when I help my loved ones navigate those really challenging situations, I wanted to take the skills I developed and help other people think differently about, how it's necessary to show up for people that are struggling and maybe can't show up for themselves, and really show up with unconditional love. And so that's what I created Cherry Willow as a brand to stand for, is a brand that is unconditional love, where it's like you're going to show up for people no matter what, even if they're struggling, if they can't show up, if they're struggling, they're battling that trauma. And I feel like that's the community that, from my experience with AA, that's what they do for each other. There's no judgment. They're going to be there for you because they've been there in those weak moments, and what they've gone through those struggles themselves. So I'd love for you, Christian, you can discuss a little bit on how you started that recovery process, but what that process was like, and then into what you're building with crack consciousness and Aegrum. How you're taking those really challenging experiences that you've overcome and being able to take something positive from it. I think that's something that a lot of people would be interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was my experience, was I had people who were willing to hold space for me when I was still, I mean, I'm just gonna come right out and say it. I was still mentally ill, and like I didn't even know it. I went to a detox. They sent me to treatment. Treatment sent me to one of the best sober livings here in Arizona. And at the time I was still unstable, but I didn't know it. And I had people in the recovery community who were willing to listen to like this absolute insanity without judgment, um, and offer little pieces of wisdom here and there that I still to this day I fall back on. And I do the same thing for others now, at both of my jobs and out in the community. Like my phone is always on. So if somebody reaches out to me, they can send me whatever they want, and I'll just listen without judgment because I remember what it was like to be lost and to need that guidance. And um, I look to other people for strength when I couldn't draw any, like from within.
Yeah, and I think that like building. I know that's one of our other topics, but like having the strength to be able to ask for help. That's something that I think in society a lot of times is framed as weakness, right? Like in American culture, we're supposed to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and the rugged individualism. But I think being able to really recognize that, like, hey, I do need help and have the strength to seek it out. That's how it needs to be framed, and that's how people should view it, in my opinion. Where it's one of the most difficult things you can do, but it's also one of the strongest things you can do is be willing to ask others for help. And I think like so many people benefit from that. Whereas like, man, anytime somebody asks me for help, like I'm excited. Like I'm looking for, I would love to
Yeah.
help, but when we face that ourselves, like it's something I struggle to ask for help, even still to this day. Um, so for the people that you're working with, like how do you kind of encourage them, and what does that like consciousness mean, and the cracked consciousness? What does that really mean to you, and how do you help people kind of get through the process of how you did?
Um, I guess like for me, the whole consciousness thing is, this state of awareness, like the ability to be present. Um, like I said, when I took the alcohol and the drugs away, I still had all of this like I'm just gonna say it. I'm pretty sure it's mental illness, intrusive thoughts, obsessive thoughts, just stuff that made absolutely no sense at the time, but I didn't know how to verbalize it or to externalize it. Now that it's gone away and it's quiet in here, um, when I work with people, I just kind of lead by example and I show them what's possible because when I first stopped drinking and using, a lot of people told me a lot of things, but because of what was going on in here, like I wasn't really receptive to any of it. Like I couldn't comprehend it. Uh so I just kind of sit with people knowing that they're unwell, knowing that they're unstable, and just hope that um people are at that point where they're willing to let us do the coordination of care, because everything else that they've tried hasn't worked. So it's like, okay, let us get you to where you need to go and just like trust that we're gonna help you get to the point that I'm at today, that we are at today.
Yeah, that really well said. And I feel like that trust is such a crucial component. And, at least in my experience with, people that have been homeless for an extended period of time, they don't often have that much trust in the system, because the system has failed them in a lot of ways. So, how do you go about building trust? I know you mentioned just active listening, not judging people, but are there any other steps that you're taking to really build that trust in that relationship with that person, so that they realize that they can count on you for that support? I would love if you could share anything about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, the biggest thing is having lived experience. So, you know, I come from a dysfunctional family. I have alcoholism, addiction, and mental illness on both sides of my family. Like I said, I was in and out of institutions, on and off the streets, in and out of jail. Um, I struggled. So I'm transparent and I'm, vulnerable. So people, I guess what I do is I establish therapeutic rapport by sharing my lived experience, and that that helps people to see that like, okay, this guy really has been where I'm at right now, and I see where he's at, 2 years in the future. I want what he has, so I'm willing to do what he did.
Yeah, I think that that willingness to be vulnerable and being authentic, regardless of what field that you're in, like that's how you build trust, right? Because people now they can see through a lot of the projections, if you will, that people will put out on social media, which I feel like is really common. Just people, trying to keep up with the Joneses, keep up with this image of whatever they feel like success like might look like in society. Um, and I think really the true key to success is just believing in yourself, finding and loving yourself, and being comfortable, being authentic, and being vulnerable. Which it's so much easier to go through life with walls up and not let people in. But I think the secret sauce is when you're actually making a difference, is when you are just wide open, and you're trusting and you're loving and you're not judging. And I know that kind of tails us into our second topic that we were going to discuss, which was the role of faith, neurodiversity and mental health and healing. So I'm really interested to learn about faith in your journey, as I'm not too familiar with what exactly you've experienced. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about what that faith has really meant for you and how that's impacted you, and then kind of talk about the neurodiversity and mental health components of the healing process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can talk faith all day. I can talk about God all day. Um, on December 2nd of 2023, that's the last day that I um, struggled with my alcoholism and my addiction. I was in my old apartment. Um, I was drinking. I had, pretty good amount of a lot of different substances. Um, I was laying in bed and yeah, it was really bad. I thought about taking my own life, but instead I got down on my hands and knees and I prayed to a God that at the time I didn't believe in. And that was what we in AA call like a spiritual experience, or like a surrender moment. And so it was at that point that I was like, I can't do this. Everything else that I've tried is not working. And so, I earnestly sought a power greater than myself. And then I picked up the phone and I went to treatment. And then everything just kind of unfolded organically from that point forward.
So how do you like kind of take that experience and explain it to people that maybe don't have a lot of faith? So for like myself, I was raised Catholic, and a lot of great things that came from that upbringing. My lend towards service work, was really involved serving people from a young age, but also with that came like the Catholic guilt, and not never feeling like worthy, never feeling good enough. And I've had to do a lot of work to unpack how those things affected me and impacted me, and be able to still have faith that I'm working to be the best version of myself. And I like to say that I'm spiritual. So whether it's God or any of the other religions and who they worship, like that there's just something beyond us that like brings us all together. And that I think one of the biggest mistakes a lot of people make is we separate ourselves from each other. um, and so I'd love for you to kind of extrapolate on how that spiritual experience or that moment of surrender, how did you use that as a catalyst to kind of make those changes and then build everything that you've built since then in the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, so, just to circle back, I was raised Catholic myself. I went to a Catholic high school, and it was it was such a like difficult period like of my life. I think it was at that point that I turned my back on like God and, family. That's when I started drinking and using. And so, it took a lot of work for me to, um, you know, to build that relationship with something greater than me. I don't identify as a Catholic today. Like I'm more of a spiritual person also. In AA, we have these spiritual principles that we adhere to. But I did have another spiritual experience that kind of helped me. Um, like it was like a deeper level of surrender, and like I began to trust, let's just call it God or the universe, like even more. Um, I was having a rough morning on the way to work. I was working at an outpatient clinic, and like I was trying to get into, I was trying to decide like you know, which route to take as far as spirituality goes. And I had done like the tarot thing and like, the whole like manifestation thing and like the crystals thing. Like I checked a lot of different things out. And I just asked, I said, God, like I need to know if Christ truly was your one and only begotten son, like I need an answer today. I was like, or I'm walking away from this relationship, I'm walking away from recovery, I'm walking away from this job. And when I got to work that day, I got a call from one of my patients, like completely out of the blue, which is unheard of when you're working outpatient. Like I used to have to go track these people down.
Yeah.
And she called me and was like, "Hey, Christian, I just wanted to check in. And I just wanted to let you know that uh, Jesus loves you and that you're going to do amazing things with your life. Have an amazing day." And then she hung up the phone. And it was that day that I became a Christian, non-denominational Christian.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it is, yeah, it is really funny, like kind of how that works. And because I too, like after I departed from Catholicism, studied a lot of different religions. I studied a lot of philosophy. I really like Buddhism, and
same.
yeah, just like kind of being present, right? And I think like trusting. There's a really good book. I mean, there's a few really good books, but one that I read a couple, maybe once a year, is called "Become What You Are" by Alan Watts. And one of my favorite stories from Alan Watts is the Chinese farmer. Have you ever heard that before, Christian?
I have, but I mean, I would love for you to share it again because it's an amazing story.
Yeah. So I mean, the story goes that there was a farmer out one day working his field with his horse, and the horse ran away. And so all of the villagers come over, and they're like, "Oh, what a terrible tragedy! How are you going to upkeep your farm and provide for your family? Like, this is such a horrible thing." To which the farmer responds, "Well, maybe." The next day, the horse comes back, and it brings with it six wild horses. Again, the neighbors, they come over. "Oh, what a blessing! Your farm now has seven horses. What a great fortune has become upon your family." Again, the farmer responds, "Maybe." The day after that, his son is out trying to break one of the wild horses. He falls off and breaks his leg. Again, the villagers all come over. "Oh, this is so terrible. Your son is injured. How are you going to rely on your farm? How are you going to keep things up?" Again, the farmer responds, "Maybe." The day after that, the Chinese army comes around to conscript soldiers. They pass on his son because of the injury. Again, the villagers all come around. "Oh, what a great blessing. Your son doesn't have to go off for war." And again, the farmer responds, "Maybe." And so for me, like I love that story because so often in life we assign like positive or negative, and we attach ourselves to outcomes. And the point of that story is that something that you think may be a really good thing in the moment could turn out to be a misfortune, and something that you think to be really unfortunate could turn out to be one of the best things that's ever happened to you. um, and I actually have a personal story that relates very similar. I got this tattoo. I see you have tattoos as well. Um, so this was my grandfather's ship. It is the USS Reuben James. And one day he was working below deck with an air chisel, and the tip of it misfires right by the chief engineer's head. Um, and so the next time they come to port, there's another American ship that needs machinists. The chief engineer's like, get this Fogarty guy off my ship. The guy almost killed me. Um,
For sure.
on the Reuben Games' next voyage, it's hit by a German U-boat and sunk. It was the first ship sunk prior to the U.S. involvement in World War II. And my grandfather wrote a letter, and he was like, if I didn't make that mistake, I would have been on that ship, and I would have died. And so then, my entire dad's side of the family would have never existed. Um, and so, like, that's for me, that's something I always reflect on when I'm struggling. And I'm like, what good can come from this? I don't know what good can come from this, but I have to have faith, that this is part of my journey and like my story, and I was meant to go through this. And I feel like similar, like with you, when you're talking about that spiritual experience and like surrendering, I'd love to just hear like a little bit about how maybe you've embodied that philosophy in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, a lot of things happen, and I try not to assign, kind of like you said, like meaning to anything. It's neither good nor bad, um, because I have that faith, in God or the universe. I'm like, this is just part of my journey. Um, it's an opportunity to learn, it's an opportunity to grow, or it's a redirection. When things get chaotic and messy, I've come to find that that's when I need to like let go and take a step back. And thus far, like something better has always presented itself when I'm willing to let go and take that leap of faith into like the next chapter of my journey.
Yeah, and I think that like really brings us nicely into the third topic, which was using media and storytelling as tools for transformation. Um, so I personally love storytelling. I think that something that clicked for me when I was just studying like religion, history, but like everything is just a story. Like it's a story that someone's telling. Yes, there's historical references, yes there's facts involved, but whether you look at any of the religious texts, like at some point in time that's something that a person has put down in the format of a story. And like there are lessons that we all can learn from that, and I think as people, you're able to connect with the story better than just like facts or a lecture. So I'd love to
Yeah.
learn a little bit about what you're doing with cracked consciousness and Aegrum, and how you incorporate storytelling into the work that you're doing out in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think, you know, having like the internet's an amazing tool. All of these social media platforms that we have access to, um, they're amazing because like me and all my friends have a lot of lived experience. And I have, quite a few friends, like they have platforms and podcasts also. And it's cool to watch them and it's cool to learn from them because and to tie this back into like the authenticity and like the vulnerability piece from earlier, like people have come up to me and they've told me like, hey, when you said like this, when you told your story, like that resonated with me. And that was part of the reason why I was willing to give like AA or HA or CMA a shot. And because I mean, I have almost 5,000 followers on LinkedIn. I don't just use it for business purposes. Like I use it um to raise awareness and to advocate and to educate because like I just want people to see that um no matter how far down the scale you've gone, like you can bounce back. And so like it could just be like one detail or one event in my story that resonates with somebody and that gives them like the courage to take that first step toward, you know, like getting sober, getting clean.
Man, I love that perspective. And like that's what the expression is, like, sometimes it's darkest before the dawn. Um, and I
Yeah.
do feel like the universe or God, like, really will test you, right? And I think there's a lot of like patterns. Like, is this person strong enough to break this pattern? And I've also studied like a little bit of neuroscience and um, a little bit of how our brains actually work. And like, so that's, if you think of the brain as like an electrical circuit, like the more often it fires a certain pattern, like the more ingrained that pattern becomes, and the more challenging it is to break, in a different direction. And so when I first learned of cracked consciousness, that's kind of what it said to me, was like, this is someone that, to your point earlier about awareness, where it's like you've opened up these different pathways, you've given yourself an opportunity to think differently, and whatever, through whatever actions that was. And so for you, it's faith, and that value of being authentic, of showing up, of telling your story. Yeah, it's just extremely powerful. And I think that's what's helped me as doing the work that I do at Cherry Willow, connect with so many people. And just because I share really openly what I've went through, even though it wasn't, maybe experiencing homelessness or battling addiction personally. I've certainly experienced trauma in my life. I've experienced a lot of difficult situations, and I think that's something that is really important with the work that I'm trying to do, and I believe what you're trying to do as well, is helping people
Yeah.
that maybe aren't as close to these situations understand the people that have gone through them and not judge them. So I'd love if you could talk a little bit about how you're able to help people overcome like that judgment, and how we as a community of people that are trying to work to better each other can inspire more people to get involved, and actually take the time to learn about people that are maybe have gone through some different challenges that they haven't.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this kind of ties into topic two about neurodiversity and mental health, because I can talk, clinical mental health all day long. Um, those patterns that you touched on, right? Like whenever whenever I experienced like pain or a big feeling, like whether it was guilt or shame or abandonment or betrayal or grief, on a subconscious level, like my brain wanted to reach for alcohol or drugs. And I went to a lot of meetings and a lot of therapy, and I learned about neuroplasticity and like I love neurology. And so like it is really challenging to break those behavioral patterns.
Yeah.
Um, that's where cognitive behavior therapy comes in, dialectical behavior therapy. Uh, I love mindfulness. I love meditation because like if you do like whenever you're experiencing a big feeling and like your first thought is, oh, I need a six pack or I need to smoke this joint or I'm having anxiety, like I need a Xanax, you want to sit with that and you want to do the opposite. So for me, it's, let's go to a meeting, let's pick up the phone, let's go to the gym, let's journal, let's go for a walk, let's go for a hike. And like at first, like or excuse me, I'll speak in first person, like I was super impulsive because those neural pathways were so solid and it took a lot of strength and a lot of courage to repeatedly fight the urge to pick up a drink, pick up a drug, or engage in like a high risk behavior. And that's that impulsivity piece, which I personally feel as though ties into like ADHD and OCD. I think a lot of people that struggle with alcoholism and addiction also have co-occurring like OCD and ADHD.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, just from the those studies that I've done, and it hasn't been in any like formal educational settings. It's just been more through reading and then experiential learning through supporting my loved ones. But I think like ADD and ADHD, like they can also often be like a superpower if you let them. But like to your point, like it can also present a lot of challenges, especially with navigating certain systems. So I know, like for myself in school, it was challenging to stay focused all the time. Just because of how my brain works, and if you didn't fit into this pattern or mold, then you could be labeled as, like a troublemaker, or someone that's like a pot stirrer. And I was more like the class clown variety, like just trying to get people to laugh. And I
Yeah.
was still like a pretty good student, but I've excelled so much more as I've learned about myself and how I learn, and not judge myself, where it's like I used to make myself feel guilty that I didn't fit into XYZ path. um and when you realize and just like accept yourself for who you are, like I think that's a huge thing about being able to articulate that and help other people understand you, and kind of move forward with authenticity. And yeah, it's really interesting how the system is set up in certain ways to, like, and study the history of the education system. It was funded by someone who was trying to create factory workers and soldiers. It was not meant to inspire creativity and thought. It was meant to tell people like, hey, when the bell rings, you get up, you move on to your next spot, because that's what they thought that we needed at the time. And now, obviously, the modern education system, there's a lot of wonderful people that are doing incredible work in there, but I think there's a lot of other different ways that people can learn and communicate. I think that's really important in being able to actually connect with people, is communicating to them in a way that they can understand and be received.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I too was labeled problematic. I was hilarious, or like at least I thought.
Yeah,
But I was in and out of the principal's office like several times a week. And I'm actually this is a cool story. I didn't think I was gonna be able to go to college. Um, because I didn't like school. I'm really smart, but I had such a hard time sitting there and paying attention. Like my teachers would have to send me on like these like special little missions because I was so disruptive. And they'd be like, "Oh, Christian, you get to do this today." And I'd be like, "Oh man, I'm, super excited." And it turns out like they were just trying to keep me busy because I couldn't sit still and I couldn't stop talking.
yeah,
But with that said, like when I take when I take that same skill set, yeah, I mean, it's passion. I apply it to recovery. I apply it to mental health. I mean, I love school now because I'm studying something that actually interests me. Um,
right.
but yeah, the OCD and the ADHD, they really are superpowers. You just have to figure out how to take that same energy and drive and passion and direct it toward and like invest it into um, something useful and something for me that something is helping other people. I can work 70 hours a week and I can get 4 hours of sleep like 4 nights a week and still function. And I know that that's excuse me, because of my OCD and my ADHD.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, like for me, when you have ADHD, or when it just enables you to process things like a lot quicker. So you're not expending like all this excess energy. And I know for me, in the work that I do, it can often be really emotional, really heavy work. And like I don't get to spend as much time at the shelter or with people experiencing homelessness as I would like. But when I go there, it's you'll see like signs on the wall, like these are the people that we lost this month, and it's really hard. Like these are people that I could have been having conversations with just a couple of weeks ago, and they're gone. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people, or enough people, understand about homelessness in particular. Is the average person experiencing homelessness dies 24 years younger than someone who is sheltered. I mean, and that is just a huge loss of life and time. And it's like these are people that have stories, and that they have gifts. And like for the writing I do about Cherry Willow, like I deeply believe that everyone has light that they were meant to bring into this world. And often it's just not recognized, or people aren't in the right room where they're valued, and it can be extremely discouraging. And I think that that can lead people to really struggle, and then however they battle those struggles, like whether it's substances or just distracting themselves with other things, like it's really really challenging. But I think that that brings us to our last topic of the day, which is building community, the ability to be resilient, and like focusing on sustainable change. So we've spoken a little bit about AA, NA, some of the other communities that exist in the substance and recovery space. I'd love if you could talk a little bit more about what those mean to you and how we can encourage maybe more people in the community to get involved and to support each other rather than having some of that judgment that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, sure thing. Um, do you mind if I use the restroom super quick? Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to focus.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll
Okay,
I'll talk a little bit about the work that we're doing, building
okay.
community at Cherry Willow. Um, so really the goal in using apparel, like this is one of our partner shirts. It's SYL Noise. So he is a Christian rapper, and gets the SYL is shine your light, show your love. And so when I wear this shirt, there's a really cool graphic on the back. The unique thing about apparel is it allows you to make those in-person connections. Like here it's digital world. There's a lot of beautiful things about it. Myself and Christian, we're able to connect when he's in Arizona and I'm out here in Chicago. But also our phones that everyone's looking at all the time, they allow us to disconnect from the person right next to us. And I think that there's a loneliness epidemic that is currently going on in this country. And a lot of that stems from people not building community, not going out and being involved in their community. And just, whether they're working remotely or they're going from work back home, they're exhausted and then just watching TV at night, or, not being involved. And so that's the role that apparel plays, is to spark that conversation, spark that curiosity of like, oh, what is this organization? Oh, wow, they're here in my community. I didn't even know. How can I help? How can I get involved? And so that's a really cool way to bridge the gap and have that ability to connect with people in person. And something that I've gone through in the last couple of years since getting divorced was not being with my kids during certain holidays, and particularly the first Christmas, and really every Christmas since then. Um, that's a day that you're super excited, especially with little ones. My kids are now 8, 9, and 10. That I'm really looking forward and excited to spend with them. And I was only able to spend a couple of hours, but instead of just going back home or getting down or being negative, I went and served at the shelter, and it was really cool to be there on Christmas, and to be there on New Year's and Easter and some of these other holidays that I would usually be celebrating with my family, because you do feel like you're a part of a community and you feel like you're doing something good and you're helping out. And so I would encourage anyone out there that's listening, like if you ever are feeling lonely, look for organizations. There's plenty of people out there that need help, and I think you'll be surprised if you show up for people at how positive you will feel. And you may find people and build a community that way. There's a lot of people that are doing incredible things, and I think a lot of people are too scared to put themselves out there, and so they just end up. I can speak from experience. Like I didn't put myself out there for most of my life. I was someone that was just like, I'll do as little as possible, what I need to get by. And I would kind of move the goalposts, and high school is like, oh, school is just about getting into a good college. And college, I was like, oh, it's just about, getting a job. Um, and so I would always justify like not fully applying myself, because I'd be like, well, of course it's okay if I don't do really well because I'm not trying that hard. Um, and then, yeah, probably about 3 years ago, I had a similar, like a spiritual experience where a light flip switched, and I was like, man, it would be really cool to see what I could do if I just applied myself and consistently and was passionate. And so that's what I've been doing with the work here at Cherry Willow, is just taking my skills and trying to create something that really means something and that affects people and impacts them to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Um, that was really cool about the Pedal for Progress ride. The first stop was at St. John's Program for Real Change, which is in Sacramento, and they are a domestic violence shelter. And the women and children there that we got to serve, we made some pancakes and eggs, and got to speak to them for a little bit. And I've stayed connected with a few of them on social media since, and they shared with me that, like, just being a part of that ride, it gave them a lot of hope and optimism, and it made them feel like something bigger than themselves. And there's so many people out there that, just like Christian, I don't know if he's back yet from the bathroom, but by sharing your story, by showing up authentically for others, that's one of the most powerful things that you can do. And it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable and put yourself out there. So yeah, I'd love for you, Christian, as I've been waxing poetic here for a while now, to just
I appreciate
talk
that.
about building community and being resilient and that sustainable change that you're working on out there in Arizona.
Yeah, thank you for holding it down while I was away.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Community is so important, and like when it comes, especially with recovery, you have to get involved. Um, we have so many meetings and so many organizations and so many functions. I just went to uh this event called Soberfest. What day is today? Tuesday? I think it was Saturday, and it was, all the treatment centers and the sober livings, the outpatient clinics, like sober recording artists. Um, One of the meeting halls here in town, it's called the Spot Sober Lounge. They helped organize this event. And so like there's so many opportunities to get involved. And, I always say it's better to be interested than interesting. So like I remain curious,
Mm.
because like I know I'm an interesting guy, but I'd rather go up to strangers and just start asking questions. And that's actually how I formed a relationship with, somebody I've been watching and learning from for the last 2 years. His name's Estel Wallace. Shout out Estel and Cornerstone Healing Center. This dude is really big on Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's really big on community, and he has these community unity events, once a month, where like all the treatment center employees and the sober living employees, um, like mental health providers like myself, you can just show up and network, and he brings all these speakers in, and people talk about ways that we can like move the needle, as far as recovery and mental health and like housing instability go. And it's just so cool to be a part of so many like different things here in Arizona. I can only speak for myself, but I don't think I would still be clean, had I not gone and like checked all these events out and like introduced myself to all of these strangers. I asked a lot of questions. I'm like, I want to know about this. Like, teach me how this works. Oh, I want to learn about, this process. Like, teach me how this works. And people have been really gracious, and there's just so much here to check out and to learn about and to be a part of. And that's why I said earlier, like Arizona is one of the best states, for alcohol and drug treatment and sober living.
Yeah, and I think that because from what I've learned about AA and um, like the community component is huge for anyone. And I talked a little bit about like the loneliness epidemic that's going on, and I think when you're through a screen, you can really be hateful without any consequence. where it's like when
Yeah.
you're connecting with people and you're in person. Um, and I love that you talk about being curious, because I think that's something that not enough people are. Like for me, I'm extremely curious. Like I'm always just interested in people, and I'm gonna steal that phrase. Better to be interested than interesting. I'm gonna use that. And yeah, it's so cool what happens when you just take a genuine interest in people that you meet, and those are some of the relationships that have been the most supportive of the work that I'm doing. Is just people that I'm like, I take an interest in their work, and then like, oh, what do you do? Oh, wow, that's really cool. How can I be involved? How can I support? But it started with me being interested in them. It's and just being curious and asking questions, and yeah, wanting to learn. um I think that's a lot like with school we were talking about earlier. Like, man, it would be so cool if like schools were put on in a way that inspired curiosity, rather than like just to memorize facts or
Yeah.
whatever. Like, and I think that's something that there's so much that you can learn, and like being a lifelong learner is something that I pride myself in. And I think it starts with being curious, and I think that's another skill that enough people don't utilize.
No, I agree with you. I think I think there's something about neurodiversity that allows us to remain like almost childlike when it comes to the curiosity thing. Because like I have so many friends and they hide behind like these personas here in the recovery community and like these companies that they built and these brands that they have. And like I've gone and like introduced myself to a lot of these people and I don't really talk about what I'm working on, even though everybody knows. Like I just show up and just start asking questions. And I think as people get older, like they lose uh, that desire to learn and to explore and to adventure. And it's like really sad to see. Um, Also, one thing I've learned is like make sure not to take interest in the wrong people. That
Yeah.
was a really painful experience for me. Like I tried to get involved with you know, some organizations here in town and like, some of the owners weren't very nice about it. So again, like that's why I'm super grateful for my buddy Esther Wallace. I just started I walked into an addiction treatment networking event a couple months ago, like completely uninvited. Uh, I talked my way through security and it's just because I wanted to meet this guy. I'd been watching his content for like a little over a year. I just walked in, I introduced myself to him and now I talk to him all the time, and he's super involved with recovery and with mental health and with housing. And I'm like, cool, like, so being interested paid off. And then he asked me like a little bit about myself, and I told him, person in recovery, going to school for a social work master's degree. I work at this hospital, I intern at this organization, and all it took was me going up to him and introducing myself. And I just wish more people were courageous and curious enough to go do things like that. I love when people come up to me. I'm like, yeah, dude, like, here, I'll tell you everything you need to know, and I want to learn about you, and how can we collaborate? And it's that curiosity that's been like so beneficial for me, not only professionally but personally. I have some really amazing people in my life today that I know from the recovery community and just from putting myself out there, which requires a lot of courage.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the point that a lot of people get into the comfort zone, where it's just easier to not change, to 'cause what we were talking about earlier, like those patterns, just continuing to repeat those same patterns and go through the motions without any thought. And I think that maybe the neurodiversity does help with that, where it's like one of the things that I think about a lot is like change is a constant. We're constantly changing on a cellular level in our bodies, in a space-time continuum level, like just with the Earth's revolution and our orbit through space. Like there's nothing about us that is the same at like from a moment to a moment. um but like that's just like the perspective that I have. And so like a lot of people don't think that way. They're like, oh, I'm the same person. I've been in the same place for forever. Um, and I think it's almost more of a mindset. Whereas if you can get into that growth mindset, um, and that's like going back to philosophy, you're growing or you're decaying.
Hmm.
And so like that's what I always try to make sure is that I'm growing, because I'm we're always going to be changing, but I want to make sure that I'm changing in the right direction and I'm not like withering away.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. That growth mindset is so important because in the last 2 years, I have changed so much and I've become a totally different person. And growth is never comfortable, but like having the courage to walk through that fear, uh, and like sit with that discomfort, that's what allows people to become the best version of themselves that they can possibly be. And it's like I'm always chasing something, whether it's a book or a system or a person. I'm like, dude, I just want to learn everything that I can so that I can be the best version of myself possible, so that I can help as many people as I possibly can. I don't do well with complacency. Like if I'm not learning and growing, I get miserable. And when I get miserable, I drink and I use drugs. So like I have to be on the move constantly. And I know I annoy people sometimes, but like I don't care. Like, if you don't want to have a relationship with me, or if you don't want to sit down and have a conversation with me, like that's all you have to do is tell me that. Otherwise, like I'm always on the move. I love people. I love learning. Yeah, I didn't realize how rare that growth mindset was until I got into like behavioral health and addiction treatment, and I just see so much complacency and uh, a lot of miserable people, and I'm like, not me, dude. I'm like, I'm just gonna keep learning and growing and helping people, and I'm really passionate about everything that I do.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that it's evident. And like I got to connect with my cousin when I was out in Arizona. um and he had played in the NFL, and so he's very familiar with like hard work. And a lot of the guys in the NFL, like with all the injuries, they can struggle with addiction, with the prescriptions and things like that. But something that he said really resonated with me. Is like I am energized by the work I'm doing. Like it's not a
Yes.
drain. And I think that that's something that you and I share, where it's like we can both do a lot of really heavy things, but because we're helping people and we're becoming better versions of ourselves, it's like we're excited and we have the energy for it. And I think that that kind of taps into like the cracked consciousness, just tying it back to, as we're kind of wrapping up here. um
Yeah.
it's like once you have that awareness of like what your purpose is, and you're walking that right path, like you'd be amazed what you have the energy for. And so I would just encourage anyone out there that's watching, like just learn about yourself, but put yourself out there. You may not even know some of the things that you love, some people that are in your community that you'd be really great connections with. If you're not willing to put yourself out there, that doesn't mean you got to go talking your way through security into some event you're not invited to. But you got to
Hey,
do
I had to get out there.
but you got to do something and put yourself out there. So, Christian, any parting thoughts for anyone? Where can people find you? How can they support your work? And then Layla, I'd love if you could put up the collections, for Cherry Willow. So if you want to support both of us, if you got something from this, we have some really cool merchandise available for both Aegrum and for Cracked Consciousness. And Christian, yeah, I would love if you could just share any parting thoughts with the people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I can be found professionally on LinkedIn, both my professional profile and the business that I started and am trying to grow, and then the Cracked Consciousness YouTube channel that can be found on YouTube. I am also on IG, like not as active because I'm so busy with school. I'm also on Facebook personally and professionally. I love when people reach out to me looking for guidance and direction. I love sharing about like my journey, and people ask me for help all the time with things pertaining to behavioral health. I'm like, hey, I'm a resource, and I will freely give whoever, everything that I have access to. And I guess like the only parting words I have are, um, you touched on purpose. Like I wake up every day so grateful and so excited because I love what I do. And I think once you find out what your purpose is, like it's just so easy to keep moving forward because you fall in love with what you do, rather than looking at it as like this is a chore. It's like, no, man, I'm grateful that I'm alive and not in prison. And look at all these really cool things I get to do, now that I'm in long-term recovery.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you framed it that way. As like that's something, because in building something like Cherry Willow and building it from the ground up, there's a lot of changes, but it's like, and a lot of challenges. But when I view it through the lens of like, I'm grateful that I get to do this.
Yeah.
That's exciting. It's like this is something that I chose to do. This is hard work, but it's worthwhile. And so kudos to you, man, for doing what you're doing. I really appreciate you coming on. I think this was a great show, and hopefully there's more people that are out there and inspired to share a little bit more of their story, to show up in a more authentic way. And hopefully we help some people by this sharing our stories with them today. So appreciate you, Christian, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everyone in the audience for watching. Like I said, if you want to support both Christian and Cherry Willow, we have the collections available for sale at cherrywillowapparel.com. And please tune in next time for some more exciting updates and some really powerful stories. Thank you. Thanks, Christian.